Chapter 551. The Ten Commandments. Second Commandment. Thou shalt not use my name in vain. Third Commandment. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Fourth Commandment. Honor thy father, thy mother, and thy children as you love me. Fifth Commandment. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Sixth Commandment. Thou shalt not kill the innocent. Seventh Commandment. Thou shalt not bear false witness, frame, or violate contracts. Eighth Commandment. Serve me with your heart, not with your offerings. Ninth Commandment. Those who have committed lesser wrongdoings, first atone for your sins before seeking forgiveness. 10th Commandment. Honor my name by helping your compatriots and companions. One commandment after another echoed in the ears of the bald rebel, Kalat, causing him to completely prostrate himself. He held his head close to the ground, uncontrollably trembling, slightly with reverence, fear, and excitement. As a mid-sequence beyonder, a rebel who had once been educated in the Fasak Empire, he had sufficient insight to understand that the worship of the sea god was based more on fear. Fear of powerful forces, fear of the fearsome natural risks that mankind faced, and many rituals that retained primitive bloodshed, a backward faith that reveled in inhumane and uncivilized practices, something that would be eliminated sooner or later. However, the faith he had developed since he was young had made him afraid to go against the divine revelation. He could only bury the idea of modifying the ritual process deep in his heart and avoid the parts which conflicted with his own wishes as much as possible. Now, the sea god's sudden change left him extremely delighted. It was as if he could see the so-called primitive totem that outsiders claimed it to be, evolving into a true god.
Blessed are we, blessed are the rebels, blessed are the true believers.
In his blurred vision, Kalat raised his head, spread his hands sincerely, and placed them against his mouth.
I will abide by your teachings, as if I am praising your name.
The blurry figure in front of him disappeared, the magnificent voice by his ears vanished, and the scene in the cave returned to its original state. However, Kalat knew that everything was no longer the same. He moved his elbows several times and quickly crawled back to his wheelchair. He once again sat on it and turned to the other side of the cave. Kalat quickly met with Edmonton. This member of the resistance, with a blue sea serpent tattoo, was standing in front of the deity figurine that was bleeding abnormally. His forehead was a mix of scarlet red and black, dirty and gruesome. However, Edmonton's expression was joyful, excited, and satisfied. He looked at Kalat and blurted out,
"Did you receive the revelation?"
Yes, it's the aura of God. Just like before, not only has God reappeared over the land, but he has also rebuilt his covenant.
Kalat nodded in excitement. Edmonton let out a sigh of relief.
I was even suspecting that I was hallucinating before. It seems like as long as an outsider touches the Holy Sword, God will be able to walk the land again. There's no need for it to be completely lifted.
Kalat chimed.
Indeed, the reason why the deity figurine shattered and bled is because God has changed his image. We must build a new one, just like the scenes we saw earlier.
God also showed his sacred emblem. Above the symbol of the waves, there was a scepter in the shape of lightning, surrounded by strong winds.
Edmonton said as he recalled. Kalat immediately patted the armrest of his wheelchair.
Let's find the high priest right now. He should have also received the revelation. We will usher in a new world.
Above the gray fog, Klein put down the sea god's scepter and rubbed his temples in exhaustion. He had noticed a problem earlier. The sea god's scepter could respond to ritualistic magic, which meant that it could provide a certain amount of strength to help the worshipper complete the ritual and achieve their goals. However, it could only be concentrated within his domain and could not exceed the limit. Whatever could be done was relatively limited. For example, the Evernight goddess could use a method of influencing fate to let her believers naturally obtain the money they needed and pay their debt. As for the sea god scepter, it could at most produce fake money on the altar, and after a while it would become ineffective and return to its true form.
This is the difference between a false god and a true god. Besides, apart from the gray fog, as long as it fulfills the procedure and prayer, the sea god scepter is capable of automatically responding to ritualistic magic, unless it will use up more than half of its power in one go. This might be why the steps to ritualistic magic are extremely important. Above the gray fog, prayers will be screened, reduced to points of light. The Sea God Scepter is unable to automatically respond, hence requiring me to manually handle them. This makes it relatively troublesome. It's impossible for me to stay here all day. Of course, there's also a benefit to it. As long as the prayer doesn't have any mistakes, and it is accurately pointed towards the Sea God Scepter, regardless of how perfunctory the ritual is, they will be able to receive a response. The only criteria is that I'm in a good mood. I'll think of a solution when I'm free. I'll make it so that even if the Sea God Scepter is above the gray fog, it will be an automated answering machine. Produce a paper angel? That's useless, as it doesn't have any soul injected into it. Make a mechanical and rigid puppet to handle the repeated and trivial ritualistic magic? I wonder if a marionettist has powers related to this. At the very least, Rosago only showed traits of controlling a person like a puppet.
As Klein's thoughts slowly settled, his eyes moved to the iron cigar case. After some research, he discovered that this cigarette case that had a severely corroded exterior had undergone some abnormal changes. It was firmer, tougher, and more resistant to corrosion. However, it was still within a comprehensible and acceptable range of normal humans.
It isn't equipped with any special properties. However, if it were placed here for a few years, decades, or even longer, where it holds beyond our characteristics and mystical items, perhaps it could really evolve into a sealing case whose effects would gradually fade one day.
The corner of Klein's mouth twitched, and he turned his head to look at the junk pile in the corner. They were covered by the gray fog, almost blending in with the surroundings.
Heh.
Klein laughed dryly and looked away. He fiddled with the crushed golden wine cup again, confirming that there was nothing wrong with it. After doing all this, he entered the real world and summoned himself once more to bring the sun brooch and other items back to his room in the inn. At this very moment, the clouds in the sky had disappeared, and the moon was scattering its crimson tranquility. The entire city of generosity, Byam, remained asleep in its dreams. 9 a.m. Cathedral of Waves. Alger was summoned, and by using the excuse of a confession, he once again met the diocese bishop, Chogo. Chogo handed over the portrait in his hand.
Look for this person?
Alger muttered in his mind as he unfolded the piece of paper.
Another mission. What's going on recently?
When he saw the contents of the portrait, he almost couldn't control his laughter. It was impossible to tell if the figure in the portrait was male or female, or what they looked like. How was he supposed to find them? In a split second, he thought of something and didn't try to hide his change in mood. Instead, he deliberately blurted out.
Who is this?
The portrait depicted an unusually blurry and mysterious person, with no characteristics that could be used to aid in a search.
There was no such mission yesterday. A sudden demand to pursue this person this morning. What happened last night? Calvetua perished completely. With that happening, the church and the military would definitely search for its remains. Samim Island is the clue? This person took away the most important item ahead of them? Who is this person?
Alger's heart skipped a beat, and he almost didn't dare meet Chogo's eyes. Chogo nodded.
A dirty, despicable thief. He may be from Intis or Fasak, and he may belong to the Church of the Eternal Blazing Sun or the Church of the God of Combat.
Someone from Intis or Fasak, or someone from the Church of the Eternal Blazing Sun or the Church of the God of Combat? Why would there be such a guess and conclusion? His Eminence John Cotman only received little information at the scene and was unable to pinpoint the target. In this case, it's indeed possible to presume that this person is from either Intis or Fasak, as the main supporters of the resistance in Calvetua are from those two countries. There is reason to believe that they may have already known where Calvetua was hiding. It fits my theory from before. Of course, it could also be something else.
Alger controlled his emotions and asked,
What did he do?
You don't need to know. Just pay attention to any abnormalities from people from Intis or Fasak in Byam. Yes, also include the locals who have become beyonders. Also, find the people who previously posted the notice on the front door of the cathedral. They might know something, and they could quickly give you further information.
Chogo ordered in a deep voice.
This is indeed a direction. This is tantamount to telling me that this person has something to do with the notice and the perishing of Calvetua. I wonder whose hands Calvetua's beyonder characteristic landed in. Who... Right. The world is in Bayam. Something happened to Calvetua not long after he came here. Could this be Mr. Fool's purpose? Would this help him in the process of removing the seal and regaining his strength?
Alger's pupils contracted as he recalled his conjecture from a while ago. When he woke up, Klein, who had reaped a bountiful harvest last night, was uplifted and in a good mood. He decided to treat himself today and make sure that his 3 meals would be sumptuous and delicious. As he pushed open the door and walked into the living room, he saw that Danitz was out of bed, untying the bandage and splint around his arm.
He recovered that quickly?
Klein was stunned for a moment. Seeing German Sparrow look over, Danitz chuckled and said,
My ability at recovering isn't too bad. My sequence 9 is called Hunter. I received a clear improvement in various aspects of my body, allowing me to surpass ordinary humans. When it comes to combat, I experienced a great enhancement. Besides, I'm already at sequence 7.
Sequence 9 Hunter? I've killed one, and I know the corresponding sequence 6's name is Conspirer.
Klein suddenly recalled the first enemy he encountered back when he first arrived in Backland. It had sucked him into a maelstrom that he was almost unable to extricate himself from, Klein asked in passing.
Sequence 8 Provoker?
He had long since guessed Danitz's beyonder pathway from his adeptness at using fire. It was the Red Priest pathway which Roselle had called a true man. Sequence 7 was called the Pyromaniac, also known in ancient times as Fire Mage. Danitz froze for a second, thinking that German Sparrow was doubting him. He subconsciously raised his voice.
Do you think I'm not good at provoking? No, I'm an expert in this field.
Chapter 552. Pomp Danitz threw the splint and bandages into the trash, flexed his left arm, and said,
Typically, a pirate's provocation is an insult, but I'm different. I do targeted insults. This requires one to grasp a lot of information and rumors, and also understand the provocation target. Only by doing this will you be able to make him lose his mind and cause his brain to be burnt out with a single sentence.
He paused for a second and said,
Just like with Steele, you can curse him, calling him dog**t, or you could curse his parents and captain, but that will be useless. However, if you do an action and throw in a line with that, he will definitely turn into a bull who only sees red.
With that, Danitz put his hands on his hips, held his crotch, and shouted in a low, scornful voice,
BTCH.
I really want to hit him. He lives up to being a provoker. Indeed, Steel Moretti has such tendencies and hobbies, Tiesk.
Klein loosened his subconsciously clenched fists.
This is what you call professional provocation.
Danitz spread out his hands in conclusion.
If I meet a beast, a monster, or someone who cannot be communicated with since they had lost control, I can proactively emit a feeling that they hate. This is a beyonder power.
People with such beyonder powers would either be great at receiving beatings, or they would be great at escaping. Clearly, you belong to the latter.
Klein cursed inwardly. Without having to worry about his injured left arm, Danitz was in a good mood as he continued.
Actually, I'm very good at setting up traps. It's a pity that you didn't agree with my plan when hunting Steel Moretti.
Klein resisted the twitching of his mouth as he calmly replied,
You still have a chance.
What chance?
Danitz asked out of curiosity.
A chance to set up traps for beyonders such as Steel. One by one, I'll introduce you to them.
Klein smiled. Danitz was momentarily at a loss for words. He knew very well that traps were often ineffective against a man who wasn't afraid of guns, projectiles, fire, or water. Danitz let out a hollow chuckle and turned to look out the window.
The weather has cleared up. Does that mean that the serpent Calvetua is dead?
Klein answered tersely without hiding the truth. Danitz exhaled, hesitated, then said,
Regardless, after this citywide sweep, few pirates will dare come to Bayam for some time. This will definitely include Admiral of Blood. Your plan of hunting him with Captain might have to come to an end. The Sonia Sea is so big, so it's very difficult to find a fleet that intentionally hides their whereabouts. Moreover, they can head for the Fog Sea, Berserk Sea, North Sea, and Polar Sea. If it was that easy to kill a pirate admiral at sea, the church and the military would have done it a long time ago. Let me return to the Golden Dream as soon as possible.
Danitz lampooned under his breath.
Don't worry, I have a way, and this will be your job.
Klein asked without batting an eyelid.
What's your captain's opinion?
He had already spent £12 to obtain a radio receiver through Fours, but he had been too busy with matters regarding the sea god to bother with it. Hence, he hadn't taken it out from the junk pile above the gray fog to bring to the real world. Meanwhile, Klein had received the money from Miss Justice and Mr. Hanged Man, raising his fortune to £7,085 and 5 gold coins. A wealth at this level was enough to buy a rather large and productive manor anywhere.
If it wasn't for my revenge and my hope of finding a way back to Earth, I could have already retired.
Klein thought in satisfaction. Captain's opinion. Danitz forced a smile and said,
Although Captain and the others should have entered within a 500 nautical mile radius, in theory, allowing the attempt of a soulfall ritual, you should know that the sea routes aren't entirely safe. Pirates have to be careful not to get caught by the military or the church. For this, they often need to take detours. I believe we should wait another day before doing the soulfall ritual, so as to prevent any wastage of energy and materials.
Okay.
Klein didn't give any affirmative answers and had turned towards the washroom. He planned on heading out again today to search for a chance to act as another person. Seeing Gehrman Sparrow's back, Danitz exhaled.
I must first contact Captain in private and persuade her to let me return to the Golden Dream before I can use the soulfall ritual in front of you. Gehrman Sparrow is someone who likes to head out. I have plenty of opportunities in space. Heh. Don't tell me that he enjoys shopping.
Danitz thought, curling his lips. After leaving the Cathedral of Waves, Alger Wilson went straight for the Ralph Trading Company in Reflection and found the owner, who was reading a newspaper. He was well aware that this middle-aged man in formal attire, a bow tie, and glasses was a veteran pirate. He supported the resistance in secret and reverently worshipped sea god Calvetua.
What is it, our captain of a ghost ship?
Ralph put down the newspaper, crossed his right foot over his left, and smiled leisurely. He was an illegitimate child. His father was an adventurer of Loan and Faysac blood, and his mother was a native. He had made his fortune by becoming a pirate, then being a merchant that did business with both pirates and the officials. He established a vast network of connections that provided him with help at the Governor General's office, the city council, and the police station. Upon hearing Ralph's question, Alger almost frowned, because the man's attitude and tone were rather abnormal. This abnormality was a state that wasn't in accordance with Alger's expectations. In his opinion, after the fall of sea god Calvetua, he was certain that there would definitely be bad omens in the Rorstedt archipelago. The pious believers would definitely sense that something was amiss, either feeling apprehensive or downcast, so how could they still be so relaxed and natural? Alger didn't directly mention Calvetua. Instead, he chuckled and asked,
Do you know where Covaro has been recently?
Covaro was the pirate captain who possessed the beyonder characteristic of the Sanguine Baron. It was said that he was once a sailor aboard the Black Emperor, and that he was part of the periphery forces of the King of the Five Seas, Nast.
Who knows? But he's surely not in Bayham. Otherwise, he would have been caught in the raids in the past 2 days.
Ralph shrugged his shoulders.
I heard that his boat went south.
Algier actually had an appointment with Covaro on this matter, and he was only using it as a way to start the conversation. Of course, he was well aware that to avoid the tsunami in the waters of the Rorstedt archipelago, Covaro had definitely gone far away and would take some time before he returned to Bayam. However, Alger wasn't too anxious, as he already knew that Mr. Moon had been given an acceptance draft. If he withdrew the sum before its maturity, he would receive a discounted value and lose a large amount of interest. Minmeshu. He deliberately nodded his head and said,
Got it. Thank you for telling me.
At this point, Algier pretended to be unaware of what happened as he asked,
I heard that many sea god figurines, in many places, shattered by themselves.
He hadn't witnessed any instances of this himself, but he could make a reasonable deduction based on the church's archives. In many of the colonial islands and countries of the southern continent, more than one or two false gods like Calvetua had been finished off by the seven churches. What happened after their deaths had already long been recorded in the archives. Ralph calmly nodded.
Yes, there was such a thing. But that's not bad news,
His expression turned fervent.
because God has appeared over the land once again in a new image.
God has reappeared over the land once again with a new image?
Algier's eyes remained fixed on him, and he felt that this was both reasonable but also unexpected. Judging from the Church of Storms' reaction, he was certain that Calvetua was already dead. Then, which sea god was responding to the believers now?
Connecting it with his previous judgment, he quickly came up with a bold idea. Is it an embodiment of Mr. Fool? He used sea god Calvetua's perishing to create a new identity. He can release his powers through the seal to directly affect an identity in the real world. Is this the real reason for the world to come to Biome? Hiss. Mr. Fool really does things with pomp.
Algier secretly swallowed his saliva and suppressed his excitement. In the Wind of Azure Inn, Klein, who had yet to leave, saw the stack of cash Captain Elland handed him.
Here is your reward for a total of £100.
He didn't mention how much Gehrman Sparrow and Danitz each received, but he gave a total amount. As for how exactly they would split the reward, that was something he left to them.
The military is really generous.
Klein silently mused as he received the thick stack of cash, instinctively taking out 2 5-pound notes and tossing them to Danitz. He lowered his wrist and finally drew another 2 10-pound notes in an expressionless manner.
Gammon Sparrow is still rather just, far more just than just Elland.
Danitz put away the reward in pleasant surprise. His wallet that had slimmed down quite significantly over the past couple of days had finally been replenished. Glancing at Gehrman Sparrow in his new clothes, Elland asked, after some deliberation, with his boat-shaped hat in hand,
News from the Church of Storms has revealed that the person who posted the notices on the cathedral's door, informing them of the problem between Leticia and sea god Calvetua, was Blazing Danitz. What do you think about that?
He stared straight into Danitz's eyes and waited for an answer.
Haha,
Danitz gave a hollow chuckle.
I don't know him.
Klein was silent for 2 seconds before saying,
While fulfilling a dead adventurer's wish, I came across Leticia and her companions at the inn. Snakes invaded our place in the middle of the night, but they easily resolved it. After returning to Biome, I went to purchase some items from the Resistance, and discovered that they had taken out their holy sword. Furthermore, there were 2 mid-sequence Beyonders guarding that small base. I felt a crazy will invade my body just by making contact with that holy sword for a moment, and I had nearly lost control on the spot. They were still after Leticia.
What Klein said was the truth. It wasn't the entire truth, but it was enough to infer the contents of the announcement. Even if the kingdom's military and the Church of Storms were to investigate further, they would only be able to unearth the fact that Gehrman Sparrow could change his appearance. After listening carefully, Elland sighed and smiled.
If there are such things in the future, you don't have to post notices in the middle of the night. You can come find me directly. This will allow you to reap even greater rewards.
He stood up, put on his hat, and said to Danitz,
I heard that the bounty for blazing is going to rise again.
Chapter 553, Danitz's Hard Work, Bounty. The muscles in Danitz's cheek twitched as he forced a smile, pretending that he wasn't blazing and that he didn't care. When Elland left, he turned sharply to face Gehrman Sparrow and said,
I think we should move to another inn. No, we'd better leave Biome as soon as possible. If I'm worth a bounty of more than 5,000 pounds, I won't be safe anywhere. The pirates and adventurers who are at the same level as me would definitely rush over like sharks smelling blood. Prey that they can finish off while also proving themselves and giving them a high bounty are always very popular. They're worth no less than treasure.
Danitz suppressed even more of his inward shouting. Klein didn't agree or disagree. He slowly smiled.
Are you worried that your bounty will be too high?
Danitz nodded heavily, finally feeling as though the madman, Gehrman Sparrow, was finally saying something sensible. Besides hiding, there are other solutions, Klein said as he walked over to the coat rack.
What are they?
Danitz asked subconsciously. Klein took off his half-top hat and put it on his head.
Raise your sequence. Let your strength match the bounty.
He put on his coat, twisted the handle, and walked out of the suite.
Raise myself to sequence 6? Become a conspirer?
Danitz paused for 2 seconds, then he frowned and grimaced. When he consumed the Sequence 9 Hunter and Sequence 8 Provoker potions, he didn't find it much of a problem. In fact, he began to long for finding the legendary treasures, obtain mid or high sequence formulas and their corresponding materials to advance to a demigod, and then become the new king of the sea. However, the intense pain and discomfort brought to him by the pyromaniac potion had left him in fear and apprehension. He didn't dare believe that he nearly lost control, despite strictly following his captain's instructions of constantly provoking his opponents. This forced Danitz to consider whether or not he was fine just getting rich, so that he could return to Intis a rich man. He stood there, troubled for several minutes. Finally, he thought of a question.
Even if I want to advance by consuming a potion, it's not something I can do in a short period of time. I'll still have to find the formula and collect the ingredients. It wouldn't be an easy task, and the new bounty might be released tomorrow or even today, so I must change inns and leave Bayham as soon as possible.
After Alger left the Ralph Trading Company, he casually went to a few places to inquire about the situation. When it was almost noon, he received a new report from the Church of Storms. It's confirmed that the person who posted the notices at the door of the cathedral is Blazing Danitz. Pay attention to his whereabouts, Blazing Danitz. Alger held the slip of paper in his hand and ruminated over the name silently. The corners of his mouth curled up, and he no longer had any doubts in his mind. With ease and certainty, he felt confident about going out to sea to hunt for materials. This was because his quest would happen at sea and because Mr. Fool has a new identity. Sea God. Having missed the morning's blue planet, Danitz waited until 4 in the afternoon to attempt the Soulfall ritual while Gehrman Sparrow was out. He drew the god of knowledge and wisdom's sacred emblem with familiarity, an omniscient eye on an open book, with the appropriate altar setup. Inside the wall of spirituality, he lit a candle and picked up the lavender and mint extract before dripping it onto the still-burning flame. A refreshing fragrance filled the air, and Danitz burned several more herbal powders. Having done all this, he took a step back and said in ancient Hermes,
I pray for the power of knowledge. I pray for the power of rationality. I pray for the God of wisdom's loving grace. I pray that you allow me to communicate with the spirit of Edwina Edwards, the teacher who pursues knowledge, the researcher of spirit world creatures, Vice Admiral Iceberg of the Seas, who hails from Lenberg.
Whoosh! Along with the echo of the incantation, the interior of the altar suddenly became cold. Apart from the 3 candles, the remaining brass dagger, the salt plate, the bottle of extract, and the fountain pen and paper all floated in midair. Danitz waited nervously, not knowing what was going to happen next. After nearly 20 seconds, the flames of the 3 candles began to sway, coloring the candles in a pale green color. Danitz's body suddenly stiffened. He felt an icy chill invade his body in an irresistible manner. He saw his feet move uncontrollably, and he took a step forward. He saw his left hand rise and grab the black fountain pen and a piece of white paper. He saw himself bend over with a pen in his left hand, quickly writing.
Is there something?
The words were exquisite and artistic, very different from Danitz's own style. It was only then that Danitz realized he could control his head and his throat.
Captain, sea god Calvetua is dead.
He squeezed out his hoarse voice as though he was suffering from a heavy cold.
Details.
His right hand wrote smoothly. This was the opportunity Danitz had been waiting for. He immediately recounted everything that had happened, including Garamond Sparrow's visit to Simim Island in order to fulfill some adventurer's dying wish, the possibility that Garamond Sparrow had suffered the sea god's curse, and how he easily resolved the problem after closing the door, including the madman's mistake of mistaking the ancient elven ruins as a sea god ruin. Towards the end, Danitz quickly added his own take on the matter.
I believe that Admiral of Blood won't come to Byam for quite a substantial period of time. Most famous pirates wouldn't. It will take at least half a year for this matter to pass. Captain, your hunting plan with Garamond Sparrow might have to be shelved for the time being. I wish to return to the Golden Dream.
His left hand froze for a few seconds before writing.
Continue to follow Garamond Sparrow and be my contact point with him.
Captain, you can teach him the Soulfall ritual.
Danitz yelled hoarsely. His left hand wrote,
This can only be done within 500 nautical miles, and in the case of the person holding the ritual, it would be quite risky for him. And you have our points of contact on the various islands. Those are things that cannot be told to outsiders.
Indeed, Garamond Sparrow is just an outsider. But Captain, I really want to go back to the Golden Dream.
Danitz racked his brains and said,
Maybe we can invite him to be a guest on the ship. No, this.
Suddenly an idea came to Danitz.
Captain, he has a messenger. He has a messenger. A messenger that travels through the spirit world to deliver letters for him. This should be an unrestricted means of communication, and it should be more private and secure. I don't need to be the contact person anymore.
Danitz thought in abnormal delight. His left hand hung in midair for a few seconds before he wrote,
If that's the case, there's no problem. As the New Year holiday is coming to an end, it's indeed time for you to return to the ship. You do have some talent in languages, but you still have quite a few problems in other areas. You need to attend more classes and work harder.
Danitz opened his mouth, but nothing came out of it. He suddenly felt that returning to the Golden Dream wasn't anything to look forward to. In the evening, Klein returned to the Wind of Azure Inn. He didn't find a suitable target for acting despite an entire day's work. Due to the sweep from before, many pirates and adventurers that were wanted were arrested. The remaining ones continued hiding cautiously, not daring to go out at all. Whether it was the bars, casinos, or brothels, business was poor and there weren't many customers. So this is the situation. Danitz came over. He cleared his throat and gave a hollow chuckle.
It would be my first time using the Soulfall ritual, and I don't have much confidence. I did a test ahead of time and, haha, it succeeded. I managed to communicate with Captain, and she believes there's no chance to hunt Admiral of Blood anytime soon. She plans on summoning me back to the Golden Dream. As for us communicating, don't you have a messenger? You can use the messenger to send Captain a letter.
My messenger was given by a big shot, and it's not mine. Moreover, the messenger can only send messages back and forth between the owner and the owner of the token, without involving anyone else. Yes, it can also be between the host of a ritual and the owner. That reminds me, I have to find a way to get a messenger of my own, or many things will be inconvenient. As for the solution to this, obviously, it's to write to Mr. Azek, who has to be an expert on the matter.
Klein calmly pulled over a chair and sat down. He leaned forward and said in a low voice,
Tell your captain that I have a way to find Admiral of Blood.
Huh?
Danitz was stunned, having not expected such an answer. Then he saw the corners of Garamond Sparrow's mouth slowly widen as he repeated,
Tell your captain.
Danitz shivered. He didn't dare to make any inquiries as he forced a smile.
We'll have to wait until the next blue planet, which is between 11 p.m. and midnight tonight.
Very good, Klein smiled as he praised. But Danitz wasn't happy at all. Klein stood up slowly, recollecting a special dish he had eaten for dinner, and he headed for the bedroom. The food was called the tiativa, and translated into Loan, it was meat within fruit. The cook used a giant local fruit, tiana, hollowed out its flesh, leaving only a solid shell, then stuffed it with mashed mutton and fish, followed by sea salt and several types of spices, and repeatedly roasted it over the fire. The meat was fresh, fragrant, and perfectly blended with the sweet and slightly sour flavor of the fruit. Closing the door behind him, Klein first wrote a letter thanking Mr. Azik for his earlier guidance. Then he asked again how he could have a messenger of his own. After folding the letter, he took out his copper whistle and summoned the messenger. The messenger didn't stay, disintegrating the moment it took the letter. Phew. Klein rested for a moment, ready to enter the space above the gray fog to see if the prayers of the believers could bring him any useful information, such as who he could actually act as. Chapter 554, Acting as God, ****. Above the gray fog, inside the palace that looked like a giant's residence. Seated in the fool's chair, Klein raised his right hand, allowing the sea god's scepter to fly out of the junk pile and land in his palm. He originally planned on placing this sealed artifact, that was on the level of a Grade 1 sealed artifact, beside his chair. This was to show respect to a demigod item, but after careful consideration, he believed that the sea god's scepter was still unable to match up with the mysterious and powerful fool, who was able to fight against the true creator and primordial demoness. Only a card of blasphemy was barely qualified to match his status. Therefore, he threw the sea god scepter into the junk pile. Looking at the blue dots surrounding the white bone staff, Klein willed them to split into preliminary categories. Just as he had expected, those blue dots of light automatically split according to his will. Those that merely praised sea god and were prayers with no clear reason sank to the bottom and then rapidly disappeared. Those regarding confessions and pleas floated upward and came closer to Klein's palm. Following his spiritual intuition, he tapped one of the latter. All of a sudden, he saw tall, surging waves and heard the violent whistling of a gust of wind. Asterisk. A fishing boat was bobbing up and down in the undulating deep blue sea, as though it was ready to capsize at any moment. Above the fishing boat, the natives were either hugging the mast or pulling on ropes, making their last-ditch efforts to survive. Many of them were panicking as they chanted the honorific name of Sea God. Noticing that this was an ongoing prayer, Klein lifted the milky white scepter. At the tip of the scepter, the blue-colored gems emitted a halo of light one after another, before they connected into one and shone onto the scene. The fishermen were gradually losing all hope when, all of a sudden, they felt the ship which had been thrown into the air stabilize. They looked around in amazement and saw that the mountain-like waves had calmed down at some point, and the raging winds were slowly calming down, turning as mild as Zarhar beer. The overbearing dark clouds in the sky dissipated, and a storm was forcefully pushed back by a mysterious force before it could fully assume its full form. The fishermen quickly recovered from their dazed states and understood what had happened. Asterisk. Sea God has protected everyone. Sea God has shown his majesty. Asterisk. Plop, plop, plop. All of them prostrated themselves on the deck, spread their hands, and placed them to their mouths, reciting the honorific name of Sea God in an irregular fashion. Asterisk. Thank you, praise you. Adorer of the sea and spirit world, guardian of the Rorstead archipelago, ruler of the undersea creatures, master of tsunamis and storms, the great Kalvatua. Asterisk. Above the gray fog, Klein felt a little depressed. Asterisk. I was the one who saved you, so why are you thanking Kalvatua? That sea serpent will only deliberately create hurricanes, set off waves, and intimidate you, so that you would piously believe in it. Asterisk. Klein fell silent for 2 seconds. Then he suddenly burst out laughing. Kalvatua is already dead, and the current Kalvatua is another one of my identities. Why should I be in a bad mood when people are thanking my other identity? This is something a faceless has to take note of when acting for real. To fully immerse oneself in the role, treating all emotions one receives as their own, but also never forgetting who they really are. This is difficult to accomplish. Failure to pay attention to it can result in an abnormal state of mind. And once a beyonder's state of mind becomes abnormal, they won't be far from losing control. Asterisk. After thinking for a while, Klein let out a sigh and chuckled to himself. Asterisk, asterisk. Acting the role of sea god has been quite rewarding after all. Although such acting doesn't provide feedback due to the gray fog's screening and isolation, nor does it facilitate the digestion of the faceless potion, it can provide me with experience and lessons, helping me figure out a safer and more effective way of acting. Asterisk, asterisk. Wrapping up his thoughts, Klein spread his spirituality to another point of light. This time the plea came from under a bridge. A woman with tattered clothes and a festering body was leaning against a corner, mumbling the honorific name of sea god as she made her final confession. Through her descriptions, Klein seemed to have witnessed her short life. She was a native woman whose parents believed in sea god. As a result, she inherited the faith of sea god. In the first decade or so, her father worked as a miner, repairing roads and laying the rails, while her mother focused on temporary jobs, sewing, doing laundry, helping out at the docks, and occasionally working as a street girl. Only then did the family barely survive. An abrupt change occurred 2 years ago. Her father had died during a road repair accident, and the Rorstead Railroad Company had offered only a pittance of compensation. This pushed the family onto a path of no return. Subsequently, the girl was sold to the Red Theater by her mother and became a legal prostitute. Although Emperor Roselle had long invented the condom, many pirates and adventurers were unwilling to use one in their desire for momentary pleasure. And since the Red Theater didn't enforce the use of condoms, the girl's resistance was ineffective. All she could do was submit, eventually getting infected with some disease. The manager of the Red Theater had tried to provide her some simple treatment, but seeing that she wasn't getting any better, she was chased out because the cost of the follow-up treatment was obviously much higher than the cost of buying another girl. Not only was the ill girl unable to find a new job, but she didn't even have the money to rent a house. Her mother and younger siblings had long since disappeared, perhaps already dead or abducted to become slaves. The girl became a tramp and lived under the bridge. She managed to survive for some time thanks to the food and free medicine provided by charity organizations. But it was ultimately a short period of time. Her illness got worse and worse, and her body became weaker and weaker. Very quickly, she reached the end of her life. At that moment, she recalled the days when she was the most well-fed and dressed. She recalled the words that the pirates and adventurers would occasionally say. She whispered and prayed to see God. Asterisk, asterisk, I want to live like a human being. Asterisk, Klein once again raised his staff, but he found that this sealed artifact didn't possess the ability to cure diseases. He thought of purchasing some medicine from Emlyn White via the world, but he found that the prayer scene happened at noon. The girl had already passed away under the bridge, in mud and dirt, her body filled with agony and intense hunger. Klein was silent for a moment. Then he raised the angle of the prayer screen to reveal the location of the bridge. After memorizing the characteristics of the nearby streets and the surrounding area, Klein leaned back in his chair, sighed, and said with an insincere smile, Asterisk, asterisk. What a humble wish. There isn't much of an opportunity to act. I'll try my best to bury you like a human being. Asterisk, asterisk. He retracted his attention and scanned the other points of light, searching for someone he could act as, but he found nothing. During this process, Klein noticed that Kalat, Edmonton, and the other members of the Resistance were carrying out a ritual. They had placed a batch of items on the altar, and they prayed for Sea God to imbue them with power. Asterisk, asterisk. So that's how they receive the Beyonder items they use for trade. To be at the level of a demigod is truly different. Moreover, they're used to not receiving any immediate replies. It's as if they plan to leave the items on the altar the entire night. Apparently, that sea serpent, Calvetua, didn't respond immediately either. It depends on its mood or whether it was asleep or not. Otherwise, it could only respond instinctively, unable to produce any Beyonder items in batches. Asterisk Klein picked up the sea god's scepter, making the blue gems shine again. Boundless spirituality magically merged together, gushing into the prayer scene with transcendent vibes and randomly fusing with various items. Asterisk, asterisk. Some of them are electric shock charms, some that allow people to swim in the sea, like fish, some that allow a gale to blow. Within 3 months, their spirituality would gradually decline to nothingness. Asterisk, asterisk. Klein half closed his eyes, feeling the changes in the items. Although he had only responded 2 times, he was already rather exhausted, despite mainly relying on the power of the sea god scepter. However, the first response had to do with him forcibly dispersing a storm and calming the waves, while the second response was to simultaneously provide an enchantment to dozens of items. They were all at the level of a demigod, so it was rather draining on his spirituality. Asterisk, asterisk. Even if I frequently used the sea god scepter, I wouldn't be able to last very long. On the other hand, the negative side effects wouldn't be a burden on me. I can attempt to use it at times. Yes, the situation with the resistance reminded me. I can also pray to myself and make a bunch of charms, mainly to allow me to do things underwater. This way, even if I find myself in a sea battle, I wouldn't be so restrained. Oh right, I still don't know how to make lightning charms. I need to seek out the corresponding mysticism information, and with it I can deal with enemies who have air superiority. Asterisk, asterisk. Klein silently muttered a few sentences and threw the sea god scepter back into the junk pile, while swiftly returning to the real world. Pause. East Chester County. By the side door of a huge manor in the vast and beautiful countryside. Asterisk, asterisk. Audrey Hall was dressed in a waist-fitting black riding suit with a simple blouse lining her insides. She skillfully sat on the back of a brownish-red mare without showing the slightest sign of wobbling. Her black leather boots were in the stirrups, with her white trousers slightly tucked into them. She smiled at Susie, who had a leather bag on her back. Asterisk, asterisk. I'll wait for you at the edge of the woods. Asterisk, asterisk. With that, she bent down with the whip in her hand and let the brownish-red mare gallop across the open field. Compared to the gorgeous yet gloomy family castle, Audrey preferred the beautiful manor and the scenery of the countryside. One handsome horse after another came running out. The riders were servants and maidservants, and their only mission was to protect Miss Audrey. Susie was also running happily, a feeling she couldn't experience in Backland. Moreover, she and Audrey would have a little adventure today, and that was exploring an ancient tower in the forest that had collapsed a long time ago. The valuable items there had long been taken away, but there had never been any accidents that happened there. It was a perfect place for an inexperienced person to practice her various abilities. The only problem was that it would be dark in 2 hours, and there might not be enough time. Chapter 555. The Message Late at Night. East Chester County was still cold in January, with snow often piling up. The branches and leaves of the trees were withered, with beasts hiding themselves, making it appear lifeless. Audrey led Susie around the ancient tower several times while surrounded by her attendants and maidservants, but they found nothing. There were only piles of gray bricks and rotten wood, and in the gaps, there were weeds and the corpses of tiny critters. Audrey had thought she could find some murals on the wreckage of the walls, allowing her to decipher the origins of the ancient tower and use the appearance of wild beasts to secretly practice her beyonder skills, such as awe, frenzy, placate. But she was only left very disappointed.
This isn't a tiny adventure. It's just a stroll on horseback.
She pursed her lips, held her whip, and walked to her horse. Unwilling to resign herself to this, she asked the attendants and maidservants around her when she had traveled half the distance.
Are there any legends of monsters nearby?
Half of the attendants had followed her from Backland to the family castle before coming to this manor. The other half were locals and were usually busy in the manor. There was no doubt that Audrey was asking the latter. The reason why she had come to this manor was because, historically, there was a folk tradition of worshipping dragons in the surrounding areas. A young attendant secretly shot a glance at his noble and beautiful mistress. He mustered his courage, took 2 steps forward, and bowed while saying,
"Deep in this forest, there are many fearsome wild beasts. Every year, hunters die there, but no one has ever encountered a monster before. It's just like the situation described in an old folk song that goes around this place.
He recounted the folk song, and the general meaning was,
Monsters are in your dreams. Dragons are in your dreams. The great imagined palace, floating in the air, is likewise in your dreams. There is where you have everything, lasting, until you wake up. Curious children, brave adventurers, seek out the dragon in your dreams.
The attendant deliberately left out the last line, because he might be misunderstood as being sarcastic to Miss Audrey.
A dragon in a dream. The great palace that is imagined and floating in the air is likewise in a dream.
Audrey carefully pondered for a few seconds before she suddenly felt that this ancient folk song wasn't completely meaningless. According to the information about dragons that she'd bought from Little Sun, the dragon of imagination, Ankiwelt, had actually imagined a floating city with massive temple pillars supporting a towering palace complex. The name of the city was Live Seed, meaning the City of Miracles.
In dreams. The spectator pathway comes under the mind dragons, involving the conscious, subconscious, the sea of collective subconscious, and the sky of spirituality. No matter how you look at it, it certainly involves the dream domain. Perhaps this ancient folk song really is pointing to something. Could live seed really exist in the sea of collective subconscious, in dreams? But a dream is purely in the mind.
Many thoughts flashed through Audrey's mind. Even when she returned to the manor, she was still unable to come up with a clear train of thought. Entering the room, she glanced at Susie, suddenly having the urge to show off.
Susie doesn't know anything about dragons, so she definitely wouldn't be able to detect the peculiarities of this folk song. No, don't be arrogant. That's too superficial. And it's easy for Susie to discover that I'm hiding something.
Audrey walked a few steps back and forth with her back straight, and she asked in a seemingly casual manner,
Susie, what do you think that folk song is really about? I have a nagging feeling that it's not as simple as it seems.
Susie opened her mouth, momentarily at a loss for words because she didn't know anything about poetry. She gave it some serious thought and said,
Audrey, I'm only a dog.
In a forest in Blue Mountain Island, because of his agitation and excitement, Kalat didn't sleep at all. Sitting on the wheelchair, he inspected his surroundings as if he had found a reason to live apart from revenge. After making a full circle, he returned to the altar to pray once again. He remembered the contents of the Ten Commandments very clearly. He knew that he couldn't use See God's name in vain, so he planned to use the relatively vague God as a replacement during his prayers. When he approached the altar, his gaze suddenly turned into a stare because the items placed on it all had an unusual aura. For example, a dagger didn't reflect any crimson moonlight but released silver lightning. A leaf had become increasingly greener, making him feel that it was easier to breathe from a mere glance.
God has bestowed His grace.
This thought suddenly flashed in Kalat's mind. Up to this point, he no longer had any doubts regarding the transformation of Sea God. The sacrilegious thoughts hidden deep within him were completely dispelled.
The revelation from God that previously said that He will walk the land again was an implication that He is reconstructing His image. This layer of meaning goes very deep, and we actually failed to interpret it before.
Kalat slowly took in a deep breath and propped himself up with his hands before solemnly prostrating himself before the great sea god. Soon he returned to his wheelchair and headed for the residence of the high priest, Edmonton, and the others. He couldn't wait to tell his companions about what had just happened, to share with them the grace of God. At 11:15 in the evening, Klein sat in his chair and watched with a blank expression as Danitz held the soul fall ritual, memorizing all the details while he did it.
It still requires help from the spirit world.
He made a preliminary judgment. If it's a spirit world creature, one can locate them, as long as there's no mistake in the description. Just using a language with a certain amount of power can allow direct summoning or allow them to make their spirit descend. It has nothing to do with distance or range. To a certain extent, deities have this trait as well, but sometimes it's possible to get a response from them, even if the prayer is in an ordinary language. Of course, that is only if they have become believers and have caught the notice of the deity. At the level of demigods, they seem to have blended with the spirit world to a certain extent. That's why one can point towards them with an accurate description to receive the possibility of a response. But there will be a distance limitation. Once it's beyond a range, they wouldn't be able to receive the signal. Sea god Calvetua is an example. Vice Admiral Iceberg is considered a powerful mid-sequence beyonder. To achieve something like this, relying on herself isn't sufficient. She needs to use the aid of a corresponding deity and use a precise and unambiguous description. Furthermore, there are restrictions on distance and range. The moment Klein finished organizing his thoughts, the various items on the altar began to float up, with the exception of the 3 candles. Danitz shuddered uncontrollably, his expression turning cold. Very soon, he let out the female voice of Vice Admiral Iceberg.
Good evening.
Her tone seems to contain the anger of being woken up.
Klein felt that Danitz's entire person had turned feminine. He hesitated for a moment and said,
I have a way to find Admiral of Blood.
What?
Edwina Edwards, whose spirit had possessed Danitz, already had her tone return to normal, one that usually lacked emotion. Klein said simply,
They use the latest wireless telegraphy technology. I received the frequencies and passcodes from White Shark.
Wireless, telegraphy. You know such things.
Edwina appeared surprised to learn that German Sparrow, who was an expert in mysticism, would also have some general knowledge of radio communication technology. Klein politely smiled.
A little.
Edwina was silent for 2 seconds. Then she asked through Danitz,
Have they discovered that?
Are you referring to whether Admiral of Blood and company have discovered the leak of their frequencies and passcodes? In theory, they should have, since their intelligence officer, Old Quinn, has died at the hands of Mr. Hanged Man. However, wireless telegraphy hasn't reached the level of wide-scale adoption yet, so it's easy for those who use it to ignore security risks.
Klein didn't respond with absolute certainty.
Perhaps. But we can try. As long as I can listen in on the frequency, there's a very high chance of finding Admiral of Blood. As sea god, even at the level of a demigod, making it difficult for me to know about matters in neighboring seas like the back of my hand, I can still control sea creatures and ask them to seek people out.
Klein silently added. Edwina said thoughtfully,
I'll have Danitz help with the surveillance.
You know a lot about wireless telegraphy as well.
Klein grinned and said,
Okay.
When the soulfall ritual was over, Danitz watched German Sparrow take out a sizable piece of machinery and its corresponding accessories with mixed emotions. He asked in astonishment.
What is this?
Klein said flatly.
Radio transceiver.
Danitz turned to Gappa as he finally forced his question out.
Where did you get it?
Klein glanced at him.
Outside.
As he spoke, he tossed the manual and information on the frequencies and passed codes to Danitz and went back to his bedroom to sleep.
So this is what he does on his frequent trips out.
Danitz felt as though he had understood something. After much reading and experimenting, he finally mastered the usage of the radio transceiver and settled back into his reclining chair. He was soon snoring away. Without knowing how long he slept, he was suddenly awoken, astonished to hear rhythmic clicks.
What?
Danitz rolled to his feet and looked towards the source of the sound. He saw the radio transceiver in the dim room, working on its own, spitting out illusory sheets of white paper under the serene moonlight.
What's this?
Danitz conjured flames in his palms as he carefully inched forward. This scene reminded him of the horror stories that pirates often spoke off when they were bragging.
There's a problem with the radio transceiver? It's connected to an evil spirit?
Danitz decided to yell for German Sparrow the moment he discovered anything amiss. As he approached the radio transceiver, he saw several lines of ancient Faceac on the illusory sheet of paper.
Hello. I sense a familiar but unique aura, but it's about to dissipate.
Danitz attempted a response.
Hello. Who are you?
The radio transceiver produced its clickety-clack again, spitting out a piece of white paper.
My name is Erodes. In exchange, you have to answer one of my questions.